Hello and welcome to Ideagen TV. Today we have a very special episode. That is the second episode of Ideagen Hollywood, hosted by Steven James Tingus. Steven, welcome.
Hi, John. How are you?
Good. How are you doing? It's good to see you, Steven.
You too. Everything is good in Hollywood.
Wonderful. I am glad to hear that. So with that being said, Steven, I will hand it over to you for our second episode of Ideagen Hollywood.
Thank you. Today, I'm very honored to introduce, since 2014, Kate Folb. Kate Folb is the director of the Hollywood Health and Society program at the USC Annenberg Norman Lear Center. She has been a big advocate for the inclusion of storylines that affect us all. And with that, I'd like to introduce Miss Kate Folb.
Hi, Steven.
Hi, Kate. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
Yeah, miss seeing you, but you know, at least we could work together in this way. So
this is as good as it gets in terms of seeing each other for anybody these days, right?
Exactly. So, Kate, thank you again for joining us today. Could you give a little overview of your role and the program at the Hollywood Health and Society project?
Sure. So Hollywood Health and Society is a program of the USC Annenberg Norman Lear Center. So we're housed at the University of Southern California, Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, Norman Lear Center. And I know that's a mouthful. But we've been founded since 2001 with a generous grant from television icon Norman Lear, as well as a grant from the CDC. And now we have funding from many other organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the SCAN Foundation and California Healthcare Foundation and many others. But we have been established to be a free resource to the entertainment industry on all aspects of health, medicine, science, safety, and security. So what that means is we are here to help screenwriters, TV writers, and other content creators when they're developing their storylines to help them be as accurate as possible when it comes to those topics around health and medicine and science, et cetera. So we're partnered officially with the Writers Guild, both in New York and in Los Angeles, with the Television Academy, with the Producers Guild. So we're very much part of the entertainment industry and part of their support services. And how it works is writers can contact us. We have operators standing by to take writers' calls or emails. If they have quick questions for their scripts, maybe they're working on a storyline with a character that has cancer and they want to be sure they're accurate about how they talk about it in their shows, they can reach out to us and we will connect them with an expert in that area for free. We don't take a credit. We don't take a fee. It's just in the interest of accuracy around those depictions. So we can put them in touch with that expert. They can tease out the storyline. They can, if they just need a few questions answered, we can take care of that as well. So we take the burden of doing the research off the writer. And so the writer can focus on doing what they do best, which is tell amazing stories. So that's how we work. I think we manage about 300 calls a year or interactions a year with shows from everything from Grey's Anatomy to Doc McStuffins and everything in between.
Awesome. You know, I really respect the work that you guys are doing at the center, because those of us with a medical background and training know how important it is to educate the viewers about the issues that they're facing. And sometimes it's a little questionable when writers don't reach out to organizations like yours, because it could be life-threatening or affect them for good or bad. And so
Yeah,
it's all about authenticity.
absolutely. And what we've learned from our, the other piece of what we do is we do research on the impact that television storylines have on audiences' knowledge and attitudes and even behaviors around their own health and safety. And we know from our research, as well as the research of other organizations and universities, that audiences really learn from the entertainment shows that they watch, even more so than from a news story or a commercial or a public service, or sometimes even from their doctor. They're more apt to pay attention to and ingest information that's imparted by their favorite character on Grey's Anatomy than they are often from their own personal doctor. So it's very, very important that these shows be as accurate as possible, because people are taking what they're seeing and hearing on these shows as the truth and as something that they can apply in their own lives. So we certainly don't want to be having them put out misinformation that could be detrimental.
I agree with you, because most of us aren't educated in a good term with the issues that everybody is facing or what they may face. And the doctors, they only have a limited amount of time with you in the clinical setting. So it is important that the media and Hollywood educate their viewers on many issues. And I think, newscasts could be slanted in one way or another, but a really good TV show or a documentary can make the world of difference to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's really important about my relationship with you and the center, is to support that creative process.
And we appreciate your support.
Yeah. And I'm a Trojan by family.
And the fact that you're a Trojan.
Yes. So, Kate, what 3 projects that you've worked on, not to be biased with the associations that you made, because you and I know Hollywood all too well, but what 3 projects are near and dear to your heart that you've worked on so far?
Oh, man. Wow. There are way too many. There are way more than 3. So
Right.
I'm only saying 3 because that's the number you asked, but there are many, many more. And I have to say, I tell people this all the time, that I think I have the best job in the world. I mean, It's just the greatest job in the world, because I get to work with incredibly creative people, in the entertainment industry. I get to work with incredibly devoted people like yourself, who are advocates and are working hard to make change.
Right.
I get to work with some of the smartest people in the world, scientists and experts at CDC and other places. And I get to be part of a academic institution, and I get to work with philanthropy, and people that are big philanthropists around this issue. So I'm in the nexus of just all these really amazing people and causes and institutions. And it's thrilling and fascinating. Every day is different. So anyway, but to get back to your question. So I have a couple anecdotes, and I have one that's backed up by data. Okay. So one of the shows that we worked on the first year it was out was How to Get Away with Murder.
Yay!
In the first season. Yes. Oh, that's right. Viola, of course.
Yes.
So they did a storyline toward the end of their first season between Connor and Oliver, for those of you out there who are fans of the shows. Connor and Oliver were falling in love, and Connor was a little bit of a player. He'd been around town a few times, had a few partners, or 2 or 3 or 7. And Oliver's kind of a, goody two shoes, good law student, stayed at home, worked hard. Actually, I'm not sure he was a law student. I think he was in tech. But at any rate, they wanted to take their relationship to the next level. And the writers of the show wanted to be responsible about that. And so they came to us and said, we want them to have to go get tested for HIV before they they take their relationship to the next level. So we worked with them on that storyline, and we helped craft a really funny scene that where Connor goes to the doctor to get tested, and the nurse is asking him how many partners has he had, and he's being really reluctant to share how many, and talking about condom use and all the rest of it. But they give a lot of information about HIV testing and how you can get tested. You can get your results over the phone. It's to really help destigmatize this. Anyway, it was a great episode, and at the end of the episode, which was their season finale, we learned that one of them is positive and one of them is negative. Right. And I don't want to spoil it for anybody who's going back and binging the show, but I'll just leave it at that. And so then they had to deal with their relationship, one being positive and one being negative. And what does that mean? And in the following season, they continued that storyline, and we continued to work with them on that. So that was extremely rewarding. First of all, because at that time that show was, the audience for that show was massive because it was their first season. Right. And also because we got a text from one of our followers. We do a lot of social media around the shows that we work with as well. So when there's a storyline coming out, we'll support it with social media about, hey, did you see Connor and Oliver getting tested? Well, here's where you can find a testing site near you, and things like that we'll put out on social media to help viewers. Well, we got a text back from one of our followers saying that he was a health educator in New York, and that he was notified by one of his clients that sent him an email or something and said, hey, I thought you'd be interested in this. How to Get Away with Murder did an episode last night on HIV testing, and it was really nerve-wracking. And it made me realize that I'm due. This person was saying, I'm due for a test. So I went down this morning to the clinic first thing, and I told the nurse that I had been inspired by the show. And she looked at me and said, yeah, you're the 5th guy this morning, and we've only been open an hour. So imagine that. One clinic in New York City, within the first hour that they're open, they already have 5 people coming in wanting to get tested who verbally said they were influenced by watching the show. How many came in that didn't say that? Right. And then multiply that across the country. And at that time, the show was getting like 13 million viewers. Right. So imagine what was going on in clinics around the country. So even though it's anecdotal and it's not hard data, it gives me cold chills every time I think about it. And I think about how a storyline like that can really help change people's lives and change their behavior and encourage them to go and take their own health and safety into their hands. So that's one that I'm super proud of.
Me too.
You want me to keep going? Because I got 2 more.
Yes, please. I want people to know the breadth of work that you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, we're busy. I can say that. So the other one, and this is another sort of anecdotal piece, but again, I love this story, is with Grey's Anatomy. Right. So we worked on a storyline with them on African-American women and breast cancer. And we had actually done a panel discussion at the Writers Guild in New York about this very topic not long before that, because breast cancer, many African-American women, and they were telling us this in the panel, were saying, we always thought breast cancer was a white woman's disease because anytime we saw anything about it on TV, it was always about white women. Right. So African-American women weren't inclined to go get breast exams and all of that. And so we did this storyline with Grey's Anatomy, not only on breast cancer, but on a rare form of breast cancer called inflammatory breast cancer, which doesn't present as a lump. It presents as a rash.
Right.
And so oftentimes it's missed because people think it's just some sort of skin disorder.
Right.
So they did this whole storyline. It was the character Maggie on Grey's Anatomy. It was her mother who has this rash, goes to the doctors. It turns out it's inflammatory breast cancer. And we go through her whole journey with her on that subject. Well, our mutual friend, Zoanne Clack, who is one of the executive producers of Grey's Anatomy, sent me an email and said, I just wanted to share this email with you that I got from a friend of mine. And her friend had written to her and said, you know, I had this rash on my breast, and I had been to 2 different doctors who both had said it was probably just some kind of infection. It would either clear up on its own or they'd give me something, you know, topical to deal with it. And then I saw your episode on Maggie's mom and inflammatory breast cancer. And she said, you know, and I thought, I'm going to go to one more doctor just to make sure. And she went to a doctor, and sure enough, she was diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer.
Right.
And so again, it gives me cold chills when I tell these stories, because in the subject line of the email of this friend to Zoanne, it said, Grey's Anatomy saves a life. And the fact that she was able to get diagnosed and get into treatment and her life be saved, because this is a very aggressive form of breast cancer, all due to the fact that she happened to be watching Grey's Anatomy. She'd already gone to 2 doctors. So so that's another one that I get cold chills, and I think, wow, you know, if people think TV is frivolous and just basic entertainment, they can be very wrong. You know, this can be very helpful for people's lives.
And the breast cancer issue hits home because my late mother had breast cancer. She didn't die directly of it, but she had a pulmonary embolism, and you know, there were concomitant health issues that can predispose women to various ancillary issues. So it's very important to women's health to be educated, because unfortunately, women are so busy, whether it be family or career, that they really don't make the time to take care of their needs.
Yeah.
You know?
We tend to take care of everybody else's needs first.
Exactly.
Well, and then my third example, and this one has data attached to it. So there used to be a show on the USA Network called Royal Pains. And it was a show about a doctor who treated the rich and famous in the Hamptons. But then also he did sort of pro bono work on the side. And so there were usually 2 stories within the episode, one of his rich and famous people and one with, you know, some other kind of pro-social work that he's doing. And it was a very popular show on USA for many years. And we worked with them pretty regularly. But they came to us and asked us about working on a storyline with them about a transgender teen. So this is now a few years ago. So this was, I think, in the first season of Orange is the New Black, and maybe the first season of Transparent. So there were very few, if any, trans characters on TV, and certainly none on broadcast or basic cable. You know, the only 2 shows at that time were both on streaming platforms. So they wanted to do this storyline that dealt with a transgender teen. And so we worked with them on that. But we thought this would also be a great opportunity to look at the impact that an episode like this might have on audiences, and especially USA Network, which was it's not a niche network. It's a broad channel that reaches all sorts of demographics and all sorts of political ideologies. And so we thought this would be a really great show to do a study on, to see if it affects anybody's attitudes and knowledge about transgender people and policies. And especially, this was at the time when there was a big argument going on. I think it was in North Carolina about the bathroom use and who could use what bathroom and all of that. And so it was a topic that was current, but also hadn't been addressed very much on television. So we worked with them on the storyline, and then what we did was we crafted a survey, and we surveyed viewers of the show before the episode aired, and we got their we gauged their attitudes around transgender people and around policies that relate to transgender people. And then we let the show air, and then we surveyed the audience again after the show had aired, a week or so after. And we looked at their changes, the changes in their knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. And we found that the viewers who saw that storyline had more positive attitudes towards transgender people and related policies than people in our control group who had not seen the episode. And then we also found that if they had seen more than one show with a transgender character, like maybe they had also seen Orange is the New Black or Transparent, that their attitudes became even more positive. And the interesting thing that happened during this time was Caitlyn Jenner came out with her announcement in the middle of our study. And so we incorporated questions about news coverage around transgender people, and particularly Caitlyn Jenner, but other news coverage around transgender people and policies. And we found that people, that the news stories had no effect in moving the needle in terms of people's attitudes. That in fact, the more they were exposed to news stories only about Caitlyn Jenner and about, just straight up news about transgender people and policies, the more, if they were conservative, they dug in even deeper. They became more conservative. Whereas if they watched our episode, just one episode, 40-minute episode, if they were conservative, their attitudes tended to shift slightly toward a more positive attitude.
Because probably the storyline is deeper. It goes deeper into the subject rather than a 10-minute or a 5-minute segment.
Exactly. And the thing that we in the academic world, that when we talk about studying this, is things like transportation and identification. So if you identify with a certain character, you tend to be more moved by their choices or the information that they impart. Or if you're transported into the storyline, and we've all had this, where you're watching a movie or a TV show, and at some point you're in the story. You're not in your living room on your couch. You're really transported into the story, and when you've lost all sense of your own surroundings, and you're right there. And when that happens, the information that's being depicted tends to sink in on a deeper level, because our critical thinking has gone down, and we're really open to whatever's being. So definitely. And then the use of emotion, and the fact that you're emotionally connected to the story, to the outcome, to the characters, all of that plays a part in you being much more open to the information and understanding the point of view of that character.
Exactly.
So, and we published that study in peer-reviewed journals and got a lot of press around it. And also, so even our anecdotes are proven through some of the studies that we do.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask you, we had talked about your work with Netflix and raising Dion. Are you still working on that project? Since it focuses on disability?
Yes, well, we did do some consultations with Raising Dion in the beginning. Please don't ask me to tell you if we're doing it now, because like I said, we get 300 a year. So it's hard to keep track of all of them. But yes, we absolutely worked with the show more than once, definitely, on those topics. So
awesome. Yeah. All right. Now, what's your current view of diversity and inclusion here in Hollywood, and how has the Norman Lear Center influenced the movement through the work that you're doing? In your view.
Well, first of all, Norman Lear is kind of the grandfather of using his platform, and particularly entertainment, to help people understand different points of view, or to educate people on things. I mean, he's challenged, in his day, he challenged everything from racism to the Vietnam War to, gender identity, to everything in between. And so we definitely take our nod from him, being our benefactor. That entertainment can entertain first and foremost, but can also be a place of social change and social information, and information around things as concrete as your health. So we always work with those values in mind. And we've worked on, now one thing we do, we're a nonprofit, we're a 501c3, so we don't have a political point of view. We don't have a political, we're not advocacy. So we are not out advocating for anything other than the truth, the science, the data. So, when we do work with shows on topics like climate change, to us, that's science. That's not a point of view. We're not trying to. So we stick with the accuracy. But we found that if you're accurate in your depictions, then some of those points of view are pretty clear. For example, when it comes to people with disabilities, it's much more accurate if you have an actor who actually has that disability, rather than hiring someone who doesn't to pretend that they have it. So in terms of accuracy, you'd be better off with someone who actually has the disability. Secondly, in terms of percentage of population, let's talk about crowd scenes. And, frankly, still to this day, it's important that writers put in their scripts, character A speaks to the crowd, and then you need to put in the script, the crowd is made up of 50% women, 45% Black people, X% people with disability. They have to spell it out. Otherwise, you'll end up with a crowd with a bunch of white men, because it just doesn't come to people's mind. So it's very important that, if we really want our entertainment to reflect reality, that it do so, that it look at the percentages and it reflect things accordingly.
And to our viewers that don't know this, according to the U.S. Census, 61 million Americans have disabilities, which is 1 in 5 people on the street, and that comprises 20% of America. Now, in Hollywood, what Kate and I are working on is that 95% of disabled characters are cast by able-bodied actors, whether they're Black, white, Hispanic, whatever. Only 5% are actually cast authentically by a person, an actor with a disability. And let me tell you, there are many fine actors across ethnicities that are here in Hollywood. But the hardest barrier is to make sure that we cast authentically. And that's I really am focused on the business side of the industry. And I have, a PhD and all this, so that the connection to the work that Kate is doing and her team is really important, because it's all about authenticity, and walking the walk. So that's what I'm really proud of our friendship, is that we're all on the same page and know what needs to be done. So I'm glad that your projects are so broad and really help people that aren't getting the help or education that they otherwise can't. So with that, a couple of years ago, you and I witnessed the hashtag OscarsSoWhite movement, which, like the Me Too movement, has made a big difference in our industry and communities across America. We already talked about disabilities, but how can we all work together more effectively to change the systemic injustice? Yes, I said it, systemic injustice with regard to the entertainment industry, both in front and behind the camera. And I'm sort of saying to you, at the corporate level, how can we, to our viewers, work together to make this improve?
Well, one part of my job that, or I guess that's one part of my job that, that's one area that I'm not really able to speak to. We work with writers after they're already hired.
Right.
But I personally think that it's important to have more diverse writers' rooms.
Right.
And we've had a number of conversations with our advisory board, which is made up of all entertainment industry professionals, including executives, as well as other showrunners and writer producers that we know very well, talking to them about, you're going to get stories, more diverse stories, if you have a more diverse writers' room.
Right.
And that goes for having more women, having people of color, having people with disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. So from where we stand, we're not in the business of getting writers hired.
Right.
But from our point of view, we talk about that a lot in our panel discussions and in our group discussions with the industry, that in order to bring about these stories, it's really helpful if your writers' rooms are more diverse. So from that point of view, we definitely support that. The other thing that we do a lot of and have been doing more and more of is, in fact, we did a panel discussion that had to do with clinical trials, actually, and it was about depictions of clinical trials in television, because that's an area where people of color are very, very averse to taking part in clinical trials.
Yes.
Rightly so, understandably.
Yes.
Right? So, but it can skew the data so that we get, drugs that might work on white people, but may have a different kind of effect on people of color. And we can't have that. So, so we did a whole thing on clinical trials and talking to medical shows. And if you're going to talk about clinical trials, let's try to encourage diversity, And we actually called the panel Clinical Trials So White, because it's the same problem in that area. But, part of that is getting beyond the stigma people of color or the feeling people of color have, or lack of trust for clinical trials. So the more that we can normalize that through entertainment and hopefully ease up some people's concerns about that, and then help diversify clinical trials. So it's kind of this, self-fulfilling thing that when we become diverse in one area, it helps diversify another, and so on and so forth. So we do that kind of thing a lot. We actually did a panel last year called Black Mothers Matter, which was about maternal mortality among African American women. And boy, it was an intense panel, and it was super engaging and interesting. And actually, the show The Resident did a whole episode on it. Right. And we just did another panel just a couple of weeks ago on racism in maternal health, and the fact that the reason there is higher maternal mortality rates among African American women is straight up racism. It's nothing more than that. No, and we just said it. We just call it out, and we have those discussions. And to the degree that we can help get those stories told, so that the general public can be informed, and then hopefully that will help everybody's zeitgeist about it change, so that more people of color are hired in writers' rooms or hired on crews, or whatever it is. So from that point of view, we do as much as we possibly can.
Have you ever listened? Now, for our viewers, 501c3s cannot advocate for an issue or be like a lobbyist. When I had a 501c3, we could educate our lawmakers, give them the information that they can use to make their own decisions, whether publicly or through the legislative process. One question I have for you, speaking about the Black community in Hollywood, have you reached out, or Zoanne Black reached out to Gabrielle Union or Kerry Washington about being a mother in the Black community and the difficulties that they may have during the childbearing process?
No, I can't say that I won't in the future, but to this date, no. Again, our primary target audience is our writers and creators of content. Right. So that's sort of where we put our focus. But we have done, occasional PSAs or other kinds of shout outs from celebrities about things that we put on social media. Right. So I can't say I wouldn't ever try that. But it's just, we're pretty busy just dealing with writers all day long.
No, I understand. It's just that they're so vocal about health issues and mental health issues that it provides a different perspective from the industry, where it becomes personal. And that's where people really learn, is through personal stories, or through the stories that you help create on TV.
One of the things we do often with writers, although now times have changed, but we would take a group of writers on a site visit somewhere. So we might we've piled a bunch of writers into a bus and taken them to NASA JPL to go behind the scenes and talk to the scientists there and learn about climate change and what they're seeing looking at the Earth from outer space. We've taken a bunch of writers down to South Central LA to learn about food deserts and food swamps and food insecurity and things like that. And it's really helpful to take a writer and immerse them into the actual, issue at hand, to help them develop stories around it. We've taken writers out to Santa Cruz Island to learn about climate change and environmental sustainability. So we before we were all sent to our rooms. Um, we've been doing that. We do that from time to time, and it's to give them that sort of one-on-one experience and really help them feel more connected to the issue. And then we hope that they'll go and write about it. So hopefully we'll get back to that someday.
That's awesome. And I know you will, but that's awesome because it gives them a hands-on view of what is actually going on in many communities. So that's awesome. That's awesome. So, last question. Are there any projects, and I know we're in a very difficult transition time here in Hollywood with regard to production or hopes of getting back into production. But are there any projects that you can sort of give an overview without going into names, titles, all that? Is there any issues that are on the burner that you are working on or hope to work on with screenwriters and others here in Hollywood?
Yeah, well, there's a lot to work on. But I think I can safely say that we will be seeing whenever shows get back into production, and we already have started to see a little bit, but almost any show that's dealing that is in our world in current time, that's not a historical show or a sci-fi show or an animated show, they're going to be dealing with COVID-19 because it's our reality now. And so we've already fielded a number of calls from a variety of shows on how they can incorporate COVID-19 into the context of their show. So we're going to be seeing that for sure.
All right.
I think we're going to see a lot about diversity and inclusion, particularly around race and people of color. I don't know how it's going to manifest, but I have a feeling that we'll see that. Writers write what they experience, and and they also write for what their audience is experiencing. So I'm sure we're going to see those topics for sure. And then if you think about COVID-19, you think of all the other topics that are related, like mental health. We're all after this is over, we're all dealing with mental health issues, domestic violence issues that are taking place because of the quarantine. Even things like people that are suffering with addiction, that are on maintenance medication and aren't able to access their medication because they can't go out of the house, or there's all kinds of things that are being affected, and some good things like this, the fact that we're able to interact on a platform like this in ways that we might not have been able to physically, just to get bodies in a room together. So I think all of that's going to be reflected in the next television season, whenever that television season is. And I also really I'm always inspired by these writers and content creators because, let's face it, they are the most creative people on the planet. That's why they are who they are, and that's why they do what they do. So if anybody can take a pandemic or any situation and work it into something positive, it's these creative people in the entertainment industry. And we're already seeing really creative ways that they're dealing with getting their show back on the air, turning it into an animation project, doing an episode on Zoom. I mean, they're doing all kinds of things already. So I have a lot of confidence that the creative minds in Hollywood will come up with a super interesting television season for us with amazing stories to share. So I look forward to it.
I do too. And, and in closing, I just want to tell our audience that we are committed to authenticity in Hollywood, and nothing should be off the table for discussion, because Kate and I are basically educators trying to tell stories that resonate with everyone so that everyone can value individuals for what they bring to our community. And Kate, with that, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and our years of collaborative work together. I love you with all my heart. And when we get through this, we have a lot more to do together. So I want to thank you and the center staff, and of course our friend Norman Lear, because I'm not afraid to say I'm old enough to have watched all those programs, because I couldn't go out and play. So maybe this is a 360 with regard to giving back to the community through our work in Hollywood. But he was a game changer, and he will always be remembered for bringing communities together and not dividing communities. So, Kate, thank you so much. And to our viewers, I want to say thank you for joining us today, and keep safe, healthy, and happy, because we need you on our team. Thank you all. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.